All right, what's going on, everybody? It was a very special mid-release bad publicity episode. Rocking here, and we're going to talk about the design behind Miss Marvel deck, the hero pack that everyone's probably picked up by now, unless you're one of the few that have commented that it's still not in Australia, but I don't think Michael can help you with that.
Unfortunately not, yeah.
So we are joined by a good friend of the show, Michael Boggs.
Hey.
Who you might know by now as, one half of the brain behind this game.
The best half.
The best half. The right lobe.
Yeah.
So Michael, how's things been, man? You basking in success? Are you able to walk down the street without getting mobbed yet, or?
No, it happens all the time. It's ridiculous. I was just out at CVS a little while ago. I got tackled. No, it's been good. It's been good. The reception's been real positive. Overall, it has exceeded my expectations. So people seem to be really enjoying it, and it makes me really happy because Caleb and I put a lot of hard work into it. So yeah, it's cool to see people enjoy it.
It's showing. It's showing. I'm sure for those people that are going to join us, I might have to say it a couple times as people trickle in. But we're only going to talk about the design work behind Miss Marvel. We're not going to talk about anything that is coming up, and we're not going to talk about the Green Goblin or the Wrecking Crew stuff. I'm sure Michael had a bunch of spoilers that he was like, I just want to release them right now. I said, no, stay focused. I've already hard entered the title of this episode in YouTube, and we can't stray from it now.
Can't go back. Yeah.
No. So, leading up to that, so let's jump right into it. Where do you want to start? The alt ego or the hero herself?
Let's start with the alter ego. I feel like, honestly, her as her alter ego defines so much of what her pack ended up being that might be the best place to begin.
Now, is that, is probably different for any kind of design where you get a starting point, but is this where you started for Miss Marvel? Did you guys get the idea for the alt ego first, and then you built it off that?
It was kind of, from what I remember, we kind of divided up the work early on when we were first working on these hero packs. Caleb is a huge Captain America fan, so he really wanted to do Captain America. I had heard about Miss Marvel, but I didn't know a whole lot about her. So I was like, yeah, I'll take a crack at her. From the little bit that I researched, she seemed pretty interesting. So I was like, well, the first thing I'm going to do is read her comics, and I started reading her comics, and immediately was like, these are really, really good. These are awesome. So I think that between just sort of my exploration of kind of her as a character, and then also this want to make her mechanically different than all the other heroes in the core set, we kind of just ended up on the design where we're at. And one of the big things is we wanted to make sure that people felt like they had these stretching powers, and we kind of took that idea and combined it together with sort of her family life and her friend's life and her alter ego form, and just try to make the deck built around all that.
Yeah, I gotta say, it's again continuing on, incredibly thematic, ties with the actual character herself and also the mechanics in the game. So, kudos again.
Thank you.
Maybe one day you'll get bored of me giving you the praise.
Never. You just keep showering me in your love.
Take the YouTube, all the YouTube thumbs ups. So she starts off here. I guess we're pretty standard on this hand sizes and hit points, 6'10". It seems to be the plus or minus the kind of starting point for most of these heroes, other than obviously some exceptions with the Iron Man and stuff like that. But so she's got the 6'10", flip it up. She's the 5'10". But the interesting point on this alter ego for me was the 5 recovery.
Yeah.
What's the thoughts there? How did that end up?
It's partially thematic and partially mechanical. The thematic tie is that at some point she kind of displays this ability to recover whenever she goes from her kind of stretchy powers and kind of goes back down to just her normal Kamala Khan self. She'll heal any wounds. From what I understand, like later on in the comics, she loses that. But the point in time that we were basing her off of, she had some of that recovery ability. So I wanted to make sure that she had a high recovery value. I think at first she was at 4, but over time, because of her mechanics, because she has such a low defense, you're almost never going to defend with her. The way you generally mitigate damage is through, in just her kit, ignoring any of her protection cards in her deck. The only way you can really mitigate damage is either blocking with Red Dagger or using Wiggle Room. And both of those, they're draw dependent. Sometimes you're going to get them when you need them, sometimes you're not. So it really just ended up being one of those things of like, oh, if I raise her recovery value just a little bit, it gives her some sustainability, but also just kind of makes her. I believe she's the only one with 5 recovery. Maybe is it Jennifer Walters? Does she also have 5? She might be the only other one. I can't remember, but I know that she's one of the few, if not the only one that has that. And I thought that was just a really cool thing to her. I also like how it's kind of like this almost opposite. Like on her one side, she's 1/1/1. She's got the worst stats in the game. Oh yeah. But then you flip over and it's just like, holy crap! Like that kind of makes up for it. So there were a lot of considerations going into the 5 recovery.
It's almost like you read my show notes around that from my impressions video, because I mean, unless I've just figured your design style out,
you might have. I'm pretty transparent. I'm pretty obvious.
Because I think if you really boil the card game down to just looking at the stats and looking at the play style, it's not like you're supposed to, or there's a correct answer. I mean, obviously it's a cooperative game, so you can rely on your other heroes to do to make up for your weaknesses. But yeah, with her having such a low defense, I mean, that definitely makes sense to give her that high boost, because you still don't want to you don't want her to be exhausted. You want her to be open to make those big combo plays. And
yeah.
So discard cards from the top of the deck until you find a Miss Marvel card, and then you add it to your hand. Strangely enough, limit once per round, but okay. So this was the starting point again. Is that what we're saying? You started with this alternate idea and of drawing up, building or burning through a deck, going that elasticity kind of theme, or.
So this actual ability, we went through a lot of iterations. I honestly can't remember all the different ones we tried, and nothing quite felt right. I think with this one, we wanted to just the main thing that I wanted to capture was that, as a teenager, she relies a lot on her friends and family just to get through life. I mean, teenagers have difficult lives sometimes, and she really has a lot of people that are that are close to her. So I tried a couple different things, letting her effectively get back Miss Marvel specific cards, but nothing ever quite worked until we landed on this one. I believe this one was a discussion between myself, Caleb Grace, and Jeremy Zwern. And as we all talked about it, was just like, yeah, this seems to work. We tested it and it was like, oh yeah, that feels good. So it sort of helps her get over, those turns where you don't draw the cards you need to draw. But on top of that, I think it just sort of plays in thematically as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think that I said it in a previous episode, and I don't think that Miss Marvel is a starter deck. Like, if you don't have the experience, you might struggle a little bit, and it may seem counterproductive to be burning through so many cards if it's negative, but I mean, the bread and butter of these decks is the hero ability and the hero cards. So yeah. So to find those special cards, it is, a lot, more beneficial than people think it is from that new player perspective. So again, guys, don't be shy to go digging for what you need. It's not uncommon for me to almost go through 3 turns of this deck, moving that quickly, trying to activate her power every time she's in alter ego form. So
I honestly think that's probably the biggest, I don't want to say mistake, because it is ultimately a play style decision, but generally when I see someone playing for the first time, or someone who isn't just that familiar with card games, a very common thing is for them to hold on to cards in their hand, and this is across any hero, which seems like that's the right way to go, but generally it's not. Like, toss what you're not going to use that turn, get your next few cards, and you deck out, you'll just get them all back again. Like, I'm my hope with her, I agree that she is definitely not maybe someone you teach with, teach with other heroes, teach with Spider-Man or Captain America, but once you have a little more advanced knowledge, my hope is that her alter ego ability will reinforce that concept of just get through your deck, just get as many cards and play as many as you can.
A question around that from the chat was that a decision then for why she was released in this first wave?
Her how advanced she is?
No, just what was the decision behind how she came out so early in the release of this game? Did you guys release it based on mechanic or character or?
That mostly came down to we kind of similar to the core set. We wanted to pick characters in these hero expansions. We wanted to pick characters who were sort of coupled with the really known characters and sort of the little bit lesser known characters. So our first one was Captain America. Our third one was Thor, and we were like, who is a character that was popular, that people like, but maybe doesn't have the same presence as those characters. And we talked a lot. And I don't even know who came up with Miss Marvel or where she came about, but actually, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe it was the intern who was with us at the time. He was a real big Miss Marvel fan, and he was like, this character's really cool, and a lot of people like her. So we kind of looked into her, and we're like, oh, okay, yeah. We'd all heard of her, so we were like, let's give her a try. And then as soon as we told playtesters and stuff we were doing Miss Marvel, people were just like, yeah, that's awesome. We love Miss Marvel. So I think it was more of just, we wanted to have those big names with the more comic focused characters, and she just felt like a natural fit.
It wasn't like he was trying to sabotage you, right? Like in between bringing you grilled cheeses and washing your car, he's like, Michael Boggs, I'll show this guy. Yes, release Miss Marvel.
He might have been. He was sneaky. You never know what's happening. It was a really good suggestion. He made a lot of suggestions with her early on. He really knew her really well as a character, and he helped a lot with her early design. So
it's very strange. To the timing with it, because it was almost like when you drive a certain type of car, or you never see the car you're driving or you buy, and then all of a sudden you buy this car and you see it everywhere. Right, right, and that's how it was like. It was as soon as you said, Miss Marvel's going to be our next hero, blah blah blah. Then I'm like, she was announced I just started seeing her pop up in these weird places. I was watching Disney Plus with my daughter, and they had Marvel Rising, and then all of a sudden it was Miss Marvel's all in that, and with the rest of her friends, and she was at the comic store with the new Rising, comic line for that kind of stuff, and it was just very strange to see her popping up when you're not really seeing her everywhere. And then, so I don't know if you are going to take the credit for that, if you told Marvel yourself, you're like, listen, I'm releasing this as the first pack, get her out there.
Really lean into it.
Yeah, go Marvel. But yeah, so I mean that's a very interesting mechanic off the top there. Flipping over to her actual hero side, having a response effect after you play an attack, thwart, or defense event, exhaust her, and return that event to your hand. Again, pro tip, it doesn't say specifically Miss Marvel event card. This is any kind of attack, thwart, or defense. So guys, watch out in future for other attack, thwarts, and defenses that will work in this deck. But Michael, the design behind this was what?
So this was just sort of the I believe this was kind of her very first ability, or something similar to it. It was myself and I believe Nate French who had a discussion early on about, how can you represent the power of stretching? Like, what's a way you could do that? And we both just pretty quickly came to the conclusion that being able to, pull things back it just felt like that, right? You put it out, it comes back in. It's just this physical motion that you're having to do, and I think there's something there that just kind of elicits that superpower in your brain somehow. So I believe he was the one that was like, maybe she could pull back events, and I was like, yeah, I was thinking the same thing. And from there we just kind of ran with it. There at the very beginning, there was no restriction on the type of event. So she was real powerful, especially in leadership. She could just like buff all of her allies endlessly. Funny story, the attack, thwart, and defense trait exists because of Miss Marvel. Those traits weren't on any cards at all. And then as I was designing her, I told Nate, I'm like, we need a way to restrict it. I was like, it would make sense if it was just like physical things your character was doing. And he was like, well, we could just make that a trait and put it all on all like the bracketed words. And I was like, yeah, that works really well. At first we tried making the bracketed words the things that allowed you to pull it back, but it just never quite flowed right. So this is what we landed on relatively soon after her first iteration, and she was always a 1/1/1. That never really changed, and I always love that reaction of like people saying 1/1/1, that's really bad, and you play her and you're like, oh no, that's it. If she had anything else, that would be overpowered. So her hero form was solidified really soon after her initial creation.
That's incredible. I just have to say how well that worked. Like you said, 1/1/1/1 coming from a card playing background, I wasn't too surprised to see that. It's those mismatches or those things that I see when you guys design these cards for release that I'm like, what's the reason behind this? Like, she has a low defense. They probably don't want me using her defense ability. What else is there going on here?
Sure.
So it's those kind of keywords to look at when you're building around or understanding how you can maximize these heroes is look what they're not, or, look at the strengths and the weaknesses, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Going into that is I am very impressed with these pre-built decks. I really have to say, honestly, I really thought that it was just going to be a mismatch. Like, when they said, "Oh, the hero's going to be playable out of the blister pack or whatever they're called," I was like, "Yeah, sure they are." Sure they are. But both Captain America and Miss Marvel so far have played very well. So the question here is how do you guys come up with the pairing? So you paired her with protection out of the pack. And right now, if you've had a chance to play Miss Marvel and see the rest of this stuff, what would be your favorite kind of combo to build around for Miss Marvel in that? Is it still protection, or is that the reason why you picked it?
So the main reason we went with protection, it was really just we knew right off the bat that we wanted Captain America to be leadership. We knew right off the bat that we wanted Thor to be aggression. And we kind of the first four hero packs, we wanted to make sure that we hit all the aspects. We knew that Black Widow was going to be after Thor, and we were like, well, she makes. I believe that Black Widow and Miss Marvel were kind of, they were a bit more of a discussion. It was like either one of them could do really well in Justice, either one of them could do really well in Protection, but ultimately we just felt like Black Widow fit better with Justice, and so Miss Marvel was just like, well, she Miss Marvel is very much about, taking care of her friends and family and protecting the people that she loves. So as we discussed, it was like, yeah, protection makes a lot of sense for her thematically. And a lot of times the aspects that we choose, not every single time, but a lot of times we choose the specific aspects because we feel that while it doesn't represent necessarily the character as a whole, the aspect generally in their pack kind of just shows a key characteristic of that person. So protection seemed to fit, and it was, kind of the fourth aspect that we didn't have hard assigned. So we just tried to really design everything around her power and having protection. But whenever I play her, I like her in protection. I think she's a lot of fun. I really love her in justice too. And to be honest, I think out of all of them, I tend to play her almost exclusively in Justice whenever I do sit down and play her. I just love the ability to control so much stuff, really not let the villain get ahead at all. It's just a lot of fun.
Interesting. I'll tell you that a question that we were trying to ponder with some of the people that I play with is that you have to take a hero set of cards and pair it with an aspect, and then you can fill it with neutral cards. And there's no limit of what you can do with those cards, from the mix of the aspect and the neutrals. So is it possible for me to tell you, do I have to announce what I've paired with even if I haven't paired with anything? Do I just say, hey, I'm playing Miss Marvel Protection, but I've only got Miss Marvel and neutral cards in this deck?
Oh,
have you ever seen anyone build just a hero in all neutral yet?
I don't think I have. I've never seen anyone do it. It's definitely, I think it's definitely possible, and I could see maybe making a pretty decent deck out of it. Generally, when we design cards, we very intentionally design neutrals to be the weakest of kind of the three spheres, for lack of a better term. Like the hero ones are supposed to be very impactful, really just cool, exciting cards. The aspect ones are supposed to be things that you look at and you're like, oh, I could make a really awesome deck around this. And then the neutral ones are kind of like, oh, I need to fill in a gap, or this is kind of a weakness of my deck, so I'm going to put in this character or this ability. But I think if you did it correctly, if you built your deck really well, you could probably make just a mono neutral deck.
Yeah, I should send you that build. It was in the other one. I think I only have like 4 or 5 protection cards in there, and it's just because I was like, I don't know if there just wasn't enough neutrals that I wanted to put in.
Sure,
But I mean, I don't know how you can say that some of the weak ones are neutrals. It's like, oh my gosh, when you guys came out with these packs, endurance and downtime, I was like, oh, so good. and to me, it was just like I was putting 3 copies of downtime, 3 endurance into my Miss Marvel deck, just because I was like, A, they're cheap, I'm getting variety on my my cost symbol, and I'm able to boost up all my other players at the table. So I was like, this is ingenious. So
yeah, I'm glad you like those. To be honest, both of those cards, I was not sure how they would resonate with the player base.
Wow.
The +3 hit points, I always liked it. It was always nice, and the +2 recovery, I think, for downtime. I always liked them as a player, but it was like, I don't know if people use these, but all I've heard is just positive around those 2 specific cards.
Well, that's good, because I mean, you probably know me long enough by now that I'm not going to be doing the things the way that everyone else is doing it, right? So if there was somebody playing an all-neutral deck and you didn't have a name associated with it, I'm sure you would just guess it was me anyway, right? Okay, so probably any other kind of talks about the hero itself? Or herself?
No, not really. I mean, in my mind, we covered pretty much everything. She was designed around the whole, pulling things back and really just taking care of her friends and families.
Cool. So then, moving on from there, if we look at the 2 major ones, we got Big Hands and Sneak. Can you talk about how you guys kind of lined up the maths around all of that stuff? Or, I mean, obviously you wanted, that ability in there, that's her reason, right? Big hands and stretching down. So I think this to me was the whole core of how the deck should be built around. Get these cards in your hand and then have her react to the scenario that you're in, whether you need her to be removing kind of threat, or if you need her to be that big damage doer. She's very versatile in going back and forth with these two.
Yeah, that was definitely the idea. Like the values in these cards kind of fluctuated around. I tried them at 1 cost. I had them at 3 cost. Like there was a lot of different numbers that they kind of went through. But eventually we landed on where they were. Was it 2 for 4 damage on big hands, 2 for 3 threat on sneak by, because those ratios offered enough efficiency that she could like almost always do what she wanted to do, but at the same time they weren't totally overshadowing every other card that she could put in her deck. Like, in a weird way, these cards are almost intended to sometimes take a backseat to aspect cards. Generally, heroes do the opposite. Generally, like when you play Spider-Man, that swing web kick, like you want to get that in hand as much as you can, and deal 8 damage. Or with Captain America, he's got his shield toss or his heroic strike, both really good cards. But because she's able to pull things back so consistently, I was almost afraid that it would be too boring if all you were doing was your most efficient hero attack all the time. So 2 for 4 is really good. It's a good ratio, but I think depending on the aspect that you build her in, sometimes you'll draw big hands, with an aspect card, and you'd be like, oh man, I don't actually want to play this big hands. I want to spend as a resource and do this. Like the melee aspect card, the aggression one, like that's a really, really good card in her. And I think that, in her specific deck, it's okay that card is better.
Is there a record that you're at for most big hands played in a turn?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I think maybe the most is probably there's 2 in her deck, or there's 3 in her deck.
3, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure somebody's gotten. You could fire off 4 of them in total.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody's done it. I don't know if I've. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. Cool. I don't know. Maybe that was my internet's been real bad lately, so that might have been me. I apologize.
No problems. No, I think it was here. We're all good. So yeah, I think that I think I've definitely been able to pull off 3 in a turn. And I haven't been able to accomplish any more than that. I was close, but I was like a resource or a bit shy of getting a 4th one, if I recall correctly. So yeah, really cool. So was it really hard to balance that out, like having the cost 2? Because I mean, yeah, like, if this was an event that costed 0 or 1, obviously, to have that replay, like boom, 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 right? Like it would be a little over the top. So you guys settled on 2, and it just felt right, or?
Yeah, from what I remember with big hands, I believe for a while it was 1 for 3 damage, which is just efficient in and of itself. But that was kind of the intention, right? It was like, oh, this is a hero card. It should feel good to play. You can pull it back a lot and fire it off a lot. Like, that's pretty cool. But then that ratio overshadowed literally everything else that you'd pull in your hand. And so, like, it was agreed on. Eventually, it was like, oh, this should be, at least 2 costs. But 2 for 3, just, that's a haymaker, and that didn't feel right. 2 for 5 was way too high, so we were like, oh, we'll try 2 for 4, and it just seemed to work at that ratio. So yeah, this one went through a couple iterations, but I think I'm pretty happy with where this one ended up.
All right, so this next question comes from the chat, and I'll talk slow so you can work this in your brain.
Okay.
Okay, so say I have 3 tenacity down as Miss Marvel.
Okay.
And take out an enemy.
Yep.
And play Chase Them Down.
Okay.
Recur it, play it again. How many more times could I recur and play it using tenacity?
Ooh, that's interesting. Let me look up the exact text on tenacity real quick. Let's see here. There it is. That is from Star Wars Destiny. That is not the tenacity I wanted. That's the tenacity. Why is Jeremy stealing my titles? Marvel Champions. There we go. Looking here on Card Game DB. Hero action. So
because you're a company man.
Unfortunately, because it's a hero action, you're not going to be able to trigger that in between all the responses for the chase them down. So you'd basically chase them down, pull it back with Miss Marvel. You could do it again, but then you can't. There's no way to ready her up. As soon as you do that hero action, you've basically given up the opportunity to do that response. Your response window has effectively closed. We don't really have windows necessarily, but yeah. To perform this hero action, it has to be outside of any of those response triggers. So wouldn't work. Sorry. Two chase them downs.
All right. So before we talk about the her three friends in the deck there, it seems, because I have this one and one other pack to compare it to, that most packs will come with a ally. In this one here, you have elected to put in Red Dagger as her hero ally. Can you kind of talk about some of the fun and adventures around this card?
Yeah. So Red Dagger, from what I understand, he comes a little bit later in her story. I only read a couple of the comics with him in it, and I mean, he really, from what I could tell, he doesn't have any like strict superpowers. Don't quote me on that. Somebody's probably going to come along and be like, you should have researched more. But from what I could tell, like he's got his knives, and that's his defining feature. Like he's really athletic and very acrobatic, and he's got his daggers that he throws at people and stuff. So we wanted to sort of create an ally that just kind of felt natural with her, and when we landed on this ability of like being able to pull him back and play him out again, like it sort of emulated her ability, right? He's really agile, so he's about to be defeated. Nope, he jumps up and then he can come back later. We tried a couple different ratios on here. Tried a couple different ratios on like the how much the resource cost was, how much the damage was. Ultimately, we decided that being able to pull him back can be pretty powerful. Just being able to have that blocker all the time is a very strong ability. And so we kind of toned down how much damage he was doing when he was jumping back up. And then his stats are also solid. I mean, a 3-2-2-3 is that's a pretty high on the ally curve. So it was really just, partially wanting him to kind of feel natural in her, and then just wanting to make that ability of being able to pull him back, making that feel balanced with his ability to block damage.
I just tell you though that I can't get behind the fact of the 3 cost. To me, I'm the kind of, all I want to do is pull out awesome combos, and I'm like, I just can't afford to get the value out of Red Dagger.
Sure.
Maybe it's just building for that other play style. And I'll tell you what I'm waiting for to make this card sing. And I don't know if we're gonna go over Power Land, but when we talk about the dual resource cards, Genius, Energy, Strength, I'm going to have to wait for the ones that are weird and wacky, that there are going to be 2 resources of different types on cards. Whenever you guys make that for me, and then I can play a single card and meet the requirements of spending 2 resources of different types. Like I said, I'm so focused, Michael, about trying to build this combo deck and get the resources up and the draw so that I can. Maybe it's just me, but I'm just trying to beat that and get to that level where I can play 4 big hands in a turn. But
yeah, and I think that is really what a lot of her kit suggests. Like I believe there for a while. I'm pretty sure it was just like spend 2 of any resource. But what we found in testing was that he was just it was so easy to be consistent at like pulling him back and then just making sure that she never took damage.
Oh, it is.
He's, you get swung at for Rhino comes at you for however much damage, you block, pull him back up, put them back down. Yeah, you just spent a lot of cards to get them there, but like you're basically immortal at that point. So it was decided that while that feels good and that's cool to do, like just making that a little bit harder was probably safer in the long term. I do agree though, like his 3 cost is, I think it's steep relative to everything else that she has. All of her other things are like 1, 0, or 2 costs. So it's not a huge shame if he doesn't get played. But if you do play him, I think he can work sometimes.
I think there's it's not the design of the card. It's just in the way that I build the deck around it. I think when you look at that, like you were talking about the ally scale, he's way up there on what he can do. Super powerful if you're pulling him off. What I am more likely to do is ditch him out, and then someone playing leadership is going to be able to use make the call and take him from my
that's a good play.
pile. So getting him in play as an ally, oh sweet. If you're ally building, but I just haven't been able to shift the mentality to be able to play Miss Marvel like that yet. I'm still
She's also one of the few heroes. She doesn't work as well in leadership. I actually saw a leadership deck of her not too long ago. That was pretty good. But in testing, a lot of the feedback was like she's good in protection, she's good in aggression, she's good in justice, but leadership's just a little more difficult for her relative to what she is trying to do, what her play style suggests. But I think as we get deeper into the card pool, she may have more options to help her make Red Dagger work a little more efficiently.
Yeah. Another one here is, again, maybe this is just the way I play it, but it's not in her hero set, but since we're on the ally phase, let's talk about Lockjaw for a second. This card was interesting. And to me, again, because of my build where I'm looking for cheap neutrals, I'm looking for the ability to cycle through. Oh my gosh, this 4 cost card that came out, and then you had to use 2 hits. Oh, you guys are killing me with this one. but very interesting. I mean, and again, as a neutral, you're not limited just because it came in this pack doesn't mean you have to use it. But can you kind of go into how this card kind of came into existence?
Yeah, Lockjaw was a tricky one. We knew that we wanted him to be in her pack. Like, they have such a good relationship that I think it would be a shame if he wasn't. Getting his powers to work was it was hard to do. We went through a couple iterations. I know eventually we landed on this one, and his cost ratio was different and stuff. We kind of found something similar, though, with him, like as we did with the Red Dagger. Being able to pull back allies, even if they're expensive, they can mitigate so much damage. And once you're mitigating a lot of damage, sometimes the game can start to not necessarily operate the way that it's intended to. Like, if you block tons of damage consistently, then suddenly you're not flipping to alter ego, and then suddenly because you're not an alter ego, the villain's not able to scheme as much as they normally would, and it just things can start to it can really start to warp the game. So what we found worked best with Lockjaw was like just make his cost really high. And I think, honestly, admittedly, he is overcosted. But that's intentional because he's a basic ally, and, because you can just pull him back all the time. You can pull him back, attack with him, and then block however much attack. Unless there's overkill, you're golden. Oh, he's gone. I'm going to pull him back again, do the same thing. He's almost like a turtle play style in a way, right? Pull him back, do the thing you need to do. Block with him, pull him back, do the thing you need to do. And he can be in anyone. I beyond just Miss Marvel herself, like, I could see later down the line some other hero making Lockjaw work really, really well. And while that's fun and exciting, like, I don't want Lockjaw to work too well. I think a lot of what it's doing right now is really intended to be more thematic.
Oh, 100%. Like, I've been in games where I've seen other players just put this down as a meat shield, and his 4 is you're right. Like, they're not using it for the attack or the thwart value because you're taking 2 hits off the 4. They're going to be using it just as like, I'll block for this drone, I'll block for this small minion, and he's just able to suck that up. And if it was so cheaply costed for me to just throw this down suck up the damage. And I'm just sitting behind, just la la la, doing my own thing, and then discard them, play them again, discard them, play them again. You'd have an issue. So I understand the balance there, but to me this is a really hard card, and I was more classifying this when I was looking at it. With the discussions at our table of more of a late game. It's really hard for me to play this if board state is not set up. But if I've got everything I need in my tableau and Lockjaw comes up, okay, I can put him down, help in that late game or those expert levels where a lot of minions are coming in, or if you really need to mitigate some damage, especially like we said, Miss Marvel doesn't have the ability to defend that well. So something like this is, a little meatier of a target. So very interesting card. I'm excited to see if this one will get life in my play mind later on as you guys release certain things for it.
Sure.
Interesting. All right. We've got the three main ones here that she kind of revolves around. These support roles, these personas as the key word underneath. Amir, Bruno, and Nakia. All of these pretty much alter ego actions. Starting with Bruno, exhaust, place one card from your discard pile on the bottom of the deck, then draw a card. If we look at Bruno, he's got the double alter ego action, exhaust. Attach one card from your hand face down here. It will be interesting to understand that face down reasoning. And then the action, you can be it's just a regular action to pick them up. You're allowed to add 3 cards to your hand. And Nakia is reduce the cost of the next card you play this phase by 1, helping you set up early game. But again, alter ego side. So it's really interesting the fact that you have these alter ego things. So as the hero, it lets you do what you need to do. There's more of a reason to flip back, use her high recover, and combo these cards into it too. So feel free to chat about them in any order you want there. But I've kind of grouped them all together. But interesting set of cards, and all very well costed for me in my mind to not affect my big combos or things that I'm trying to do, again, because they're one cost, right? So I can still do things on my turn and work towards setting up.
Yeah. I'll go in alphabetical order. Each one of them was very much intended, like you said, just to sort of enable her, empower her to be able to do the play style that she really wants to do. Amir specifically, because of her ability to be able to pull things back, it's really nice to be able to ensure that you got those cards coming up later. And then also on her alter ego side, milling your deck to get to a specific card. Sometimes during playtesting, people would mill their deck and then just mill themselves out. Realistically, you can know that's going to come. You count the number of cards that you have in play. You count the number of Miss Marvel cards in your hand. Count the number in your discard pile. If you see 15 cards there, don't use the alter ego ability. But not everyone necessarily thinks that far ahead. A lot of people just want that really visceral, like, oh, I'm going to get a card. And then when you go through your whole deck, you're like, oh, well, crap, that wasn't fun. I just helped the villain. I just dealt myself an encounter card. So Amir really came about from that, just giving you the option to ensure that really big explosive turn later, but also making sure that, if you do use your alter ego power, you can guarantee there's at least something there for you at the end of your deck. And also, just getting that extra card is real good. Bruno was very much intended to sort of, help with those hands where you draw up and you're like, I really want to do this card later. I really want to pull out that combo. But unfortunately right now it just doesn't work, or I don't have the resources, whatever it is. The reason that the cards are face down, honestly, is just because we found it to be a little confusing when you had all these face-up cards attached to it, which is a lot of information right there to parse at once. The rule is you can look at those face-down cards at any time, but it's really just to sort of help reduce the amount of information that you have to absorb all at once.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because in a game that has I've never played a cooperative game that is as open and discussions as this game is while the game is going on. Usually people are like, you know, oh, your information is your information and don't divulge it to these people, and, you know, or use kind of like subtle hints about what you have. But this game's just like, yeah, we're a team. Let's all talk about it.
That's what I got. Yeah.
So when I saw that, like, put them face down here, I'm like, I don't understand. Like, and I thought before I was reading it through, I'm like, do I just pick them up randomly? Is that like, and then it's
sure.
And then I'm like, oh no, it's just add 3 of them, you know, just look. But okay, that's an interesting aspect of it.
It's actually, I'm glad you brought Bruno up. That would be a really good inclusion in the next FAQ. I like that, just because I'm sure other people have that question. There was a point where he had some reminder text on him. Unfortunately, it filled up the card way too much, and we've tried to avoid as much as we can shrinking down the text size and, you know, cramming text in the box. We want it to be, you look at the card, you're like, oh, this is what it does. But yeah, I could see other people having that question. But at the end of the day, it was just really, you've got 3 cards stacked underneath him, and you look down and you're like, oh, there's a lot right here that I have to kind of look at. So we just felt it was a little bit easier. And then Nakia, she really was.
I was going to say, I guess too, from that perspective, it's probably plays safe from the perspective of if things get bumped around, you know what cards are supposed to be on him, right?
Sure.
Right, rather than if I'm playing cards, if I have stuff in my tableau that maybe have shifted and kind of overlapped on him or slid, then you're like, oh, well, what cards were here, what cards weren't. So I can see that, you know, a great way to just separate that and not cause that confusion, to say these cards are face down, they're the ones that are attached to him. So there's, you know, if anything happens, if someone gets up in an angry, you know, oh my God moment and bumps the table and
flips it.
Yeah, stuff kind of shifts, then you're able to very clearly just kind of like, oh no, these cards were in play already. These are the ones attached to him.
I will say early on, it was one of our internal playtests. Sometimes when we do those internal playtests, we would very intentionally play with people who didn't play a lot of card games, because that's a group of people that we want to appeal to. And whenever I teach the game, I advocate. I'm like, hey, if you want to just take the cards in your hand, put them down on the table, you totally can. It's open information. I personally prefer to hold them, but we know once I would tell people that, almost everyone would do it, because it was just nice to have them there. You could look over, discuss things. I could explain things. And then sometimes I would play with those same people later, and that's just the way they wanted to play. They liked having that information displayed. So early on, there was a point where the person that was playing Miss Marvel, that was testing, was playing in that way, had some cards under Bruno, and there was kind of this moment, it was like, oh, is this one under Bruno or is this in my hand? Which, you know, obviously we can't design and develop for all of those play styles, but I remember that specific point being like, oh yeah, maybe having this face down would just help alleviate some of that information parsing. And, you know, if somebody wants to play with all their information displayed, then they totally can, and not have to worry about mixing things up with him.
Great point, because every time I have taught this game to a new player, play open-handed. Because it lets them see my decisions that I'm making, the cards that I'm dealing with. It lets them see very clearly the cards that they have, and I can also explain my thinking easier when I'm like, you know, able to show them the kind of combos that move throughout the game, and I'm still well within the rule set of the game to say like, hey, you can do this if you want to do it, right? So yeah, great point to throw out there from there. Cool, but yeah, so this guy, he's really getting some good use if you're really, you know, working him down.
Yeah, I find him to be the most. He in my mind, he's kind of the most binary of the three persona supports. Like, there are some games where he just puts in work for me, and then there are other games where I don't use him that much. So I think it depends partially on, you know, what's going on, what your play style is. Sometimes it depends on what your aspect is too. But I think that's okay. I think it's okay to have an ally or support that you're not using constantly, because in the long run, I think he makes up for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on a lot of factors in this game, right? Like the state of the board. I've said though that I like Amir, like, because of how quickly I'm going through my deck to get stuff back into it. Oh,
sure.
I know it, and I'm able to use Miss Marvel's action when I get down to the bottom. I know that those are Miss Marvel cards, so I'm like, oh, I'm not. I guarantee that this is picking up in my hand, and it's a card that I'm keeping, so it's a free draw. So yeah, cool. Okay, moving on to last but not least.
On Nakia.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she was really, just designed to make sure that you could do those big plays. Something I've seen a lot of people miss. You can exhaust or reduce the cost of the next card you play as face. You can exhaust her while you're alter ego and then flip into Miss Marvel and, play your event for -1. A lot of people overlook that. So having
pro
kind
tip.
of that... Yeah, having the support that sort of helps and just get those combos going, we found, was very, very important. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's really all she's meant to do. Just make sure that you can.
I can't even think if I even thought of that one. That's an insane kind of.
It makes her really good. She's a very, very good support. But yeah, just being able to fire. There's so many turns where you'll look at your hand and you're like, I don't know if I can do this, and you look down and knock it and you're like, oh yeah, I can do this.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I don't think I've looked at it from that perspective. Shame on me, but again, I think that's the awesome part about this game is that, I mean, I don't think you'd be able to build a perfectly good timing window, right? Like it's just, it's maximizing your turn for as many things that you can do. Try to stretch it out and do it. And
yeah,
as long as you're doing one thing and moving on to the next piece, and it's looking at that wording like that in the game. So well done, and thank you for that tip to the Bad Publicity faithful. So yeah, cool, man. I mean, I think there's really not much else to say about her in general. It's just basically helping you pull those combos better.
Yeah, and that was really, at the end of the day, all three of these supports were very much just intended to, like, as characters, thematically, these are some of the people that she relies on the most. That that she really has to help get her through troubles in her life. So, we just wanted to make sure that all of these alter ego actions felt very impactful to what she was trying to do within the game. And also beyond that, like, I've always personally loved how she has 3 alter ego actions on a stick. No other hero has that type of thing. So I really like being able to flip my alter ego and being like, look at all the stuff I can do. I can recover for 5. I can get a new card. I can use Amir. I can use Bruno. I can use Nakia. Like, to me, that just always feels really good. Yeah. So yeah, I'm always pretty happy to play down these 3 because I think they definitely help her do what she wants to do.
Totally. The last thing that we'd like to touch on here is I don't have a little image queued up for it for the people that are watching here. Is her main nemesis, the Thomas Edison.
The bird dude.
Thomas Edison cannot take damage while you are engaged with another minion. This has been a thorn in my side a couple times. But can you just give kind of the understanding of how you paired this nemesis and the ability behind this card into the Miss Marvel set?
He's so thematically, he's kind of one of the very first villains that she fights. She gets her new powers, and he's kind of one of the first ones that stands in her way. In deciding to use him as her nemesis, we just kind of looked at him as a character. I mean, he's not a fighter himself. He's not someone who goes toe to toe with the people who he's going against. He is very much a schemer. So it just felt natural to really bump up his scheme value and to not make him so physically intimidating. But one of like the story arc that he's in, he builds this whole giant robot, and he's got all these other teenagers in the town that he's controlling and using to do his bidding and stuff. So it just kind of made sense that if you are preoccupied with someone else, he's probably there pulling the strings. He's kind of supposed to be, behind the scenes doing stuff. So, thematically it just fit, and then mechanically too, like being able to with Miss Marvel, I think she's kind of in the unique position to she can sometimes knock out a lot of minions at once. Big hands, big hands, big hands. So like, yeah, he comes down and he's really scary, but then, you know, she's able to be like, guys, don't worry, I'm going to knock out this one, and then get to him. It just feels really good. So, I think most of his ability was more thematic than anything else, but mechanically, like sometimes he can be really annoying, and then sometimes he just feels really good to beat up on.
Awesome. So I'll say, if anybody has any questions in the chat that you'd like answered, you better throw them up quick. Our time here is just about over. But the last thing we can talk about is the obligation. Home by Dawn. This one's not too bad. Depending on the game time, I think that this is one of the ones that when it comes up, I actually can think about, like, do I need to exhaust my hero at this moment because I wanted to do a whole bunch of stuff, so I don't want to be in an exhausted state? Can I afford to discard a persona? That's not the be-all, end-all of, as damaging as I've seen some other obligations be, because, again, it could just be my thoughts and playstyle, but I know that I'm trying to cycle my deck very quickly, so I'm probably going to get that back again. So can you kind of talk about the design of obligation, and even if you touch on, this is the first time we've kind of talked about it, but maybe obligations in general. This is also a 2 boost. I don't think most of the obligations, I think, are 2 boost.
I believe all of them are. Yeah.
Okay.
All of them up to this point. Yeah.
So just kind of that Home by Dawn.
Yeah, so a lot of times obligations for all heroes, they're very much to tell a story, but they're also there just to give your alter ego something else to do. Like this difficult situation comes up, generally you can deal with all of those difficult situations as a hero, but this specific situation, you got to deal with it in your personal life. A lot of times, most of the obligations that we've designed, we have very intentionally made that first option where you flip over, exhaust, and get rid of it. That's almost always the best option. There are some times where that happens where it's just like, well, I can't exhaust, or man, I really need to be ready for the next turn. But most of the time, flipping over, exhausting, like that is supposed to be that storytelling moment. I go back home as Peter Parker, I pay my rent, or as the lawyer Jennifer Walters, I go off and do all my legal practice stuff. This one was supposed to take that turn it on its head a little bit. So you pull this up, you read it, flipping over and exhausting her for Miss Marvel can be honestly way more impactful than some other heroes. Like, if I have to exhaust, She-Hulk and now get my 3 attack, that can be pretty big. But for Miss Marvel, that can totally change the dynamic of your entire turn.
100%.
So like, yeah. And so like, it's very much when you get this one, I honestly expect most people to do the bottom option if they can. And I think, in my mind, thematically, it really tells a story more so if you choose that bottom option, because she's getting home late, she was out saving people, and her mom's like, you can stay home and not do your hero stuff, or you can be grounded and not be able to meet your friends. And she's like, well, I got to do my hero stuff, so I guess I'm just not going to meet my friends. And it just I don't know, I kind of like the story that tells. But yeah, I think the bottom option on this one is in some ways supposed to be the go-to option. And then if you get locked in a situation where you can't choose it, or for some reason you really don't want the surge, then there's always that top option.
Wow, that answer went a lot deeper and better than I expected. No offense there, but I guess I never really looked at it from the from the angle that you guys have, of where the obligation is just another kind of game changing mechanic or balancing act that you're playing with to tell the story of the character, right? Like, it's not just something that you're like, oh crap, we made these obligation cards and now I have to think of another one, right? But it's it actually, the ties in that you get for that exact reasoning that you said, like I've never really linked it to that story element before, and that's a cool thing to kind of take. I mean, for me, drawing the obligations, I don't really stop and slow down and be like, okay, this is the reasoning behind this. I'm just like, oh my God, or I'm just, more happy because it's not mine. I'm like, oh, this is your obligation. Here you go. Play it over there, friend. But yeah, so it's more in the heat of the moment. Sometimes when we're playing these games, we don't really slow down and see it from that angle about the complete story element that you guys are weaving in. So awesome. I guess, Michael, any other thoughts in general about this pack or things that we haven't touched on that you just like to throw out there in the last, Hail Mary? Or if you, not to put you on the spot, but, if you have any kind of things that you'd love to challenge the community out there with, to see more of something in Miss Marvel or some kind of Miss Marvel deck building challenge that you think would be interesting, whether it's completable or not completable. Like, I know this is you totally.
You need to play 10 big hands in one turn.
Yeah, one for each finger.
I think we pretty much talked about all the cards that I like talking about. I mean, all the protection cards I've always been pretty happy with overall, and I think that letting people just sort of explore those on their own is very important. Putting those in other decks, I think, is always important too. But I will say, like I was kind of talking before, I was surprised to see the one leadership deck that someone had built. I believe it was last week. They'd posted it up on. I believe it was Reddit or somewhere, wherever it was. Like, I looked through the deck and I was like, oh yeah, this is really cool. I didn't think she was going to work in leadership this well. But yeah, I mean, I hope that people are just really trying to be creative with her, because that is very much her intention, just to let you do things that you really can't do in any other character. And I think as long as people are doing that, then I'm happy with that, where her design landed.
Awesome. Well, thanks a bunch for your time. Again, you've sunk always more than you need to with us. Really appreciate you taking the time out, jumping on here, answering the questions, and giving us this sneak peek behind and into the mind of of this game. Guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Appreciate all you guys viewing. I would just like you to know that every like that you give this video, I personally just package them up and send them to Michael. So, every once in a while he opens his mail and just gets a bunch of likes in it. So
it's like a big box of like crudely cut out little like thumbs up.
Yeah.
Really, really sad.
But I want you to know that they do get to him. They do reach him. So don't feel like you can't click away. It's not all in haste. So thank you guys for joining in. Michael, appreciate it, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yeah, man, it was fun. Thanks for having me on.